Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Jayo Radha Madhav, Jayo Radha Madhav, Radha Madhav, Jayo Radha Madhav, Radha Madhav, Jayo Radha Madhav. Okay, so Hare Krishna, everybody. So today we will be reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter number 2, verse number 72. So if you would like to follow along, you can follow along on your phone. It's the last verse of the second chapter. Let's bring it up. Yeah. So you can repeat after me. Esha Brahmi Sthiti Partha Nayanam Prapya Vimuhyati Sthitvasyam Antakalepi Brahma Nirvanam Rachati Esha Brahmi Sthiti Partha Nayanam Prapya Vimuhyati Sthitvasyam Antakalepi Brahma Nirvanam Rachati Esha Brahmi Sthiti Partha Nayanam Prapya Vimuhyati Sthitvasyam Antakalepi Brahma Nirvanam Rachati. Would anyone else like to recite the verse? Esha Brahmi Sthiti Partha Nayanam Prapya Vimuhyati Sthitvasyam Antakalepi Brahma Nirvanam Rachati. Esha Brahmi Sthiti Partha Nayanam Prapya Vimuhyati Sthitavasyam Antakalepi Brahma Nirvanam Rachati. So translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. That is the way of the spiritual and godly life, after attaining which a man is not bewildered. If one is thus situated, even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. Purport. One can attain Krishna consciousness or divine life at once, within a second, or one may not attain such a state of life even after millions of births. It is only a matter of understanding and accepting the fact. Khatwanga Maharaj attained this stage of life just a few minutes before his death by surrendering on to Krishna. Nirvana means ending the process of materialistic life. According to Buddhist philosophy, there is only void after completion of this material life. But the Bhagavad Gita teaches differently. Actual life begins after completion of this material life. For the gross materialist, it is sufficient to know that one has to end this materialistic way of life. But for persons who are spiritually advanced, there is another life after this materialistic life. Before ending this life, if one fortunately becomes Krishna conscious, he at once attains the state of Brahma Nirvana. There is no difference between the kingdom of God and the devotional service of the Lord. Since both of them are on the absolute plane, to be engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord is to have attained the spiritual kingdom. In the material world, there are activities of sense gratification, whereas in the spiritual world, there are activities of Krishna consciousness. Attainment of Krishna consciousness, even during this life, is immediate attainment of Brahman. And one who is situated in Krishna consciousness has already entered into the kingdom of God. Brahman is just the opposite of matter. Therefore, Brahmi Sthiti means not on the platform of material activities. Devotional service of the Lord is accepted in the Bhagavad Gita as the liberated stage. Sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Therefore, Brahmi Sthiti is liberation from material bondage. Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur has summarized this second chapter of Bhagavad Gita as being the contents for the whole text. In the Bhagavad Gita, the subject matters are Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. In the second chapter, Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga have clearly been discussed, and a glimpse of Bhakti Yoga has been given as the contents for the complete text. Om Jnanatimrandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupam Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीन बंधो जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांता राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिंधुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः गुरु वैष्णव भगवान तीने स्मरणे होय विघ्न विनाशन अनायासे होय निज वांछित पूरण नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. So translation of this verse once again, that is the way of the spiritual and godly life, after attaining which a man is not bewildered. If one is thus situated even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. So this is quite an interesting verse because it summarizes the whole Bhagavad Gita actually. So chapter 2 is considered the summary of the whole Bhagavad Gita, and this last verse actually summarizes how to get back home, back to Godhead. So this verse states that actually if one wants to go back home, back to Godhead, one must be situated in Krishna consciousness at the time of death. Now, how do we get to this conclusion? Actually, if we analyze this, it makes sense. So if you look at the world around you, you will see that there are many different living entities, many different human beings. Some are rich, some are poor, some are very healthy, some live always a diseased life, some are very happy, and some always live a miserable life. And you will see that this is existing throughout the 8 billion human beings. What to speak of the other living entities also. So all of these living entities have completely different circumstances in each one's life. But what we see is there is one thing which is certain. So everyone is bound to experience old age, disease and death. Regardless of wherever one is situated, one experiences all of these three. In fact, Winston Churchill said that there are only two things which are certain in life. Does anyone know what those two things are? He said. Yeah, taxes and death. He said that these two things will follow you even after death. So, I mean, taxes, yeah, you can't avoid taxes, and death was the other one. So death is certain for everyone. Now, how one achieves death, that is unknown practically. We don't know how we're going to die. There are some fortunate people who know how they're going to die. Like Parikshit Maharaj knew that he's going to die in 7 days after being bitten by a snake. But majority of us don't know how we are going to die. We hope, in our hearts we have this hope. Actually, first of all, many of us don't even consider that we're going to die. We think that we're going to live on forever. That, everyone else is dying, but I'm not going to die. And in fact, so much so that it's become a taboo to talk about death, especially in the Western world. We don't really talk about death. And the cremation grounds and stuff, they're kind of like hidden away from the rest of society. You don't get to go there. Or even the whole process of dying, went to a funeral here, and you see that they lock the guy away. So the guy who is being cremated, they pretty much lock them away in like a very big chamber, and then they quickly just cremate them with like some electric shock, and then they bring the ashes. They don't show you, like, for example, if you go to India, you will see the whole cremation process. Like, you actually see the whole body burning. Now, why is that the case? Well, actually, it may seem very traumatic that, you're being exposed to people dying. But actually, the whole process of Vedic culture was to remind us that we are going to die one day as well. And after one dies, especially in the Vedic culture, they recite this Garuda Purana. So, just like we have Bhagavata Purana, they recite Garuda Purana. And over there, it talks about the different kinds of hells. And it talks about what's going to happen after we die. Well, you might say that, the person who had to die has already died. So what's the point of reciting all of that? But actually, that recitation is not for that person who has died. It's actually for the rest of us who are sitting there still alive, to make us ponder or make us remember that death is coming for us also. So first of all, many of us don't believe that we're going to die. Then those who do believe that they're going to die, they hope that, they will die peacefully. They think that, I hope that I die peacefully in my sleep. Many people will say that. Like, I don't want to experience a lot of suffering, etc. But actually, if you look at it, we have no control over how we're going to die. We could die in a very miserable way. Or we could die very suddenly. Like car accidents, you can die just like that. Or if you have a cancer, for example, you can die a very, very, very miserable death. We don't know how we're going to die. Actually, we have to be prepared for how we're going to die. But the surprising thing about this material world is, or Maya, is that it can cover this aspect. It can cover this knowledge that we're going to die, and we kind of live in this bliss, or we live in this illusion that we're never going to die. So actually, it is important for humans especially to remember that we are going to die. And the circumstances in which we may die are not under our control. So what happens at the time of death? So one may think that, okay, well, when I die, it'll just be like I go to sleep and then I never wake up again. But actually, it's exactly the opposite. Death is actually a very, very painful process. It's not something which is taken for granted. The reason we know this is, if you look at those who try to commit suicide, there are many people who try to commit suicide by jumping off a building or by trying to drown themselves, etc. When they're saved, they actually say that, while I was trying to commit suicide, halfway through I actually realized I didn't want to do it because it's extremely painful. The way in which the soul leaves the body can be extremely painful. So death can be quite painful, and we have to come to terms with that. And many people don't like to hear about death because they think that it's not going to happen to them, or they think that it's too intense for them. But actually, this is reality. In fact, the scriptures say that any intelligent man or any sober man will talk about death. He will try to discuss this concept of death, because yes, it's one thing to realize that, it's going to happen to us, but there's another thing to realize how to cross over it and how to make sure that we are best situated in the time of death. We think that, when we're going to die, we will, I don't have to perform devotional service. I don't have to do anything. At the time of death, suddenly everything will be okay. Krishna will appear in front of me and then I will be okay. But actually, that may not be true. Because when we are about to die, the mind and the body becomes very weak. The intelligence also becomes very weak. We think that, other people may be able to, chant for us, and other people may be able to read Bhagavad Gita for us. And, at that time, I will be able to remember Krishna. Because Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Anta kale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram. He says that one who remembers me at the time of death, such a person will ultimately obtain me. So many people, especially in India, they have this understanding that, okay, yeah, that's fine. If I'm going to die, then at least I'll get some devotees to do kirtan for me, I'll get the devotees to read Bhagavad Gita for me, etc. But the problem is that when we are dying and when we are in the process of leaving the body, and this is from, I can't say from personal experience, but from what I've seen in patients, they start to remember everything that has gone on through their lives. They start to think, okay, well, when I was 20 years old, I did this. When I was 25 years old, I did this. Maybe I should have done this instead. Or I made a wrong decision in life. I should not have invested in this place. I should have given money more to charity, etc. That, I said some harsh words to this person. Maybe I should not have said that. And now it's too late to apologize. I won't be able to apologize, etc. So all these kinds of negative thoughts appear within the heart of a man who's about to die, especially those of guilt. Like the physical pain itself is already unbearable. And on top of that, the guilt that one experiences is even more unbearable. Because there's nothing you can do about it. You're in a completely helpless situation at that stage. So actually then the person may desire that, okay, well, if I had a chance, I would be able to rectify all my mistakes. If I had a chance, I might be able to apologize to this person, that person, etc. Maybe I should have followed the spiritual path. Maybe I should have read Bhagavad Gita properly. Maybe I should have read Srimad Bhagavatam properly, etc. All of these thoughts start to arise in one's heart. But the problem is you can't do anything about it at that time. At that time, you're completely helpless. So at that time also it is explained, how many of you have heard of deathbed conversions? Have you heard of deathbed conversions? No. So deathbed conversion actually is a topic that is very popular in some of the religious circles, where people convert on their deathbed. So they will be an atheist for their whole life, and then when they're about to die, they convert. They become a religious person. And they start to apologize to God and say that, I'm sorry, I committed so many offenses in my life. I committed so many sins. So please forgive me, etc. People start to talk about those kinds of things. But actually, what is the efficacy of such a deathbed conversion? Because who knows if you're praying to God to genuinely apologize for your mistakes, or if you're actually scared of going to hell. Actually, we can't be sure. But regardless, there's nothing you can do about it. So actually, the efficacy of deathbed conversions has been questioned by many practitioners of spiritual life. In fact, it is questioned in this verse of Bhagavad Gita also. And what does this verse say? This says that spiritual and godly life, if one is situated like this, even in the time of death, then one can enter into the kingdom of God. So what does this imply? This implies that actually spiritual and godly life is not something of a deathbed conversion. It's not something to be only practiced when one is about to die. In fact, when we are about to die, the mind is completely out of control. Like, how many of you here have had COVID? Everyone has had COVID? Anyone here who hasn't had COVID? Oh, you haven't had COVID? Oh, very good. That's good. Okay, so my personal experience is I had COVID last year for the third time. I got COVID 3 times. And the third time I had it, it was so severe. Actually, the body pains were so much that when I was going to sleep one night, I actually didn't know if I was going to wake up the next day. I was actually this close to thinking that this might be the end of my life. But actually the thing is, when I was thinking that, I realized my weakness. Because even though I wanted to think about Krishna, I could not. Like at that time, you're just thinking about how painful your body is. And in fact, that is why there is one king, Kulashekara, in the Mukundamala Stotra, he says, Krishna tvadiya pada pankaja panjarantam adyaiva me vishatu manasa rajar hamsa prana prayana samaye kafavata pittai kantavarodhana navidhau smaranau kutaste. Which means that at the time of death, my throat will be choked up with bile, with mucus, and with all kinds of secretions. And at that time, it will be extremely difficult for me to remember your lotus feet. He is praying to Krishna. So he says, oh Krishna, please, now that my mind is absorbed in your lotus feet, may I quit my body at this present moment. So such a great king, Kulashekara, who is a great devotee of the Lord, he is praying to the Lord in this way. So you can imagine how serious this topic must be of death. And in fact, we ignore this topic of death because we don't want to talk about it. In fact, when we talk about death, people become distressed. They don't want to hear about it. But actually, it's something that everyone's going to have to face. And it's something that we all have to be prepared for. In fact, it is said that death is like the final exam. Whatever you have practiced throughout your life will be tested at the time of death. That will be tested. Because whatever consciousness you maintain, that will reflect at the time of death. If you have performed devotional service throughout your life, then it will be easy for you to remember Krishna at the time of death. If we don't perform devotional service, then it will be very, very difficult. Unless there is the mercy of some extraordinary devotee, then it is not possible for someone to remember Krishna at the time of death. So you might say, okay, well, I'm worried about death. I am concerned about death. But what evidence is there that, like if I don't practice spiritual life, that I'm going to suffer afterwards? Actually, the evidence is there in the Upanishads. There is one Upanishad called Katha Upanishad. And over there, it is explained. So Yamraj, who is considered the god of death. So I'm sure many of you know who Yamraj is. But Yamraj is the god of death. And Yamraj actually tells his disciple Nachiketa, he says that the only kind of people I put into hell are those who receive a human life and they waste it without inquiring into the nature of the absolute truth. So humans are endowed with a special ability. Humans are given this special ability to inquire about the absolute truth. And he says that, Yamraj says that if a person wastes their life without discussing about Krishna, without trying to ask these questions about who am I, what is my purpose in life, why am I suffering, if one is not asking these questions, one is actually wasting his life. Because eating, sleeping, mating and defending, these kinds of activities are performed by animals also. So these kinds of activities are not something that humans perform. But what is the speciality of human beings? Human beings can question. Human beings can ponder over. They can remember the Supreme Lord. They can actually discuss the topic of the Supreme Lord. And that is why human beings should engage. In fact, it is the dharma of human beings. That is why it is said, Athato Brahma Jigyasa, which means that now that one has obtained the human form of life, one should very sincerely inquire about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So now that we have discussed this depressing part, like how death can be extremely depressing, and in fact, rightly so. And that is why death is the most feared entity within this world. Like everyone is trying to escape death, but we can't escape death. So how do we actually deal with death? So what can we do to make sure that that the consciousness of ours is appropriate at the time of death? Well, there's a few things we can do. So Srila Prabhupada recommended that the first thing we do is we chant the holy names of the Lord. So Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We chant the name of the Lord constantly. Because if we chant the holy name of the Lord, then Krishna is personally present with us. And slowly after some time, if you keep practicing this Krishna conscious process of chanting, you will feel the association of Krishna with you. You will feel that Krishna is constantly with you in the form of the holy name. And when someone feels that Krishna is with them, why will death bother you? You will not be worried about death. The second thing one should do is one should read these scriptures that Krishna has left for us. So Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says that Striyo Vaishyas Tatha Shudra, which means that this knowledge that I am giving you in Bhagavad Gita is actually meant for everyone within society. It can be women, it can be Shudras, it can be Vaishyas, it can be Kshatriyas, it can be Brahmanas. Regardless of who a person is, this kind of knowledge is relevant for everyone. So like for example, when we go on book distribution, I tried giving a book to someone today, and then he said that no, I'm not qualified to read Bhagavad Gita. But actually, if you think about it, who is qualified to read Bhagavad Gita? No, in one sense, no one is qualified to read Bhagavad Gita. But in another sense, everyone is qualified to read Bhagavad Gita, because Krishna says that this knowledge is actually meant for everyone. In fact, your disqualification becomes your qualification. Yeah, so that is how we should actually see. So this process of devotional service should be performed as soon as possible. And in fact, if anything, it should be taken up as an emergency. It's not that we should be a bit loose and a bit relaxed about devotional service, because at the time of death, it's going to come and haunt us. It will come and bite us that, why did I waste my life? So we feel that, one thing is that people at the time of death, one of the biggest death time regrets is that I wasted my life. That, I had so much time and I did not utilize this for understanding God. I did not utilize this for understanding what my purpose is in life. So that's one of the biggest deathbed regrets, that I wasted my time. So actually the solution to that is that we should try to engage our lives in understanding Krishna. We should try to engage our lives in understanding Bhagavad Gita, understanding Srimad Bhagavatam. Read the scriptures, try to understand them. Hear this message of Godhead continuously. Not just hear it, ask questions, question it. In fact, all the Vedas and all of the Vedic literatures encourage questioning. There's no Vedic literature where questions are not asked. In fact, Bhagavad Gita, the reason Bhagavad Gita was spoken was because Arjuna was confused and he asked a question. All of the Upanishads are like that also. So it's all questions and answers. Srimad Bhagavatam is questions and answers. So this should be the topic of questioning and answering, not that, okay, well, what's happening to the share market? What's India doing in the test match? What's Australia's score? You can discuss that, but that's not going to help you at the time of death. At the time of death, the only thing that will help us is the remembrance of Krishna's name, quality, form and pastimes. Because these things are things that will that will give satisfaction to the heart. So actually, those are the things that should be discussed. So chanting of the holy name, by chanting the holy name, we will always feel God's presence with us. And the second thing is, try to read the scriptures which are given here, like Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. The third thing to do is to attend the programs. Like when you attend Aarti, for example, we'll have Aarti here at the end of the ceremony. At the time of death, sometimes it is possible that you might remember this Aarti ceremony. Because actually what happens at the time of death is that all of our thoughts that we've had throughout our life actually start to flash in front of us. Some of those activities may bring us regret, but some of those activities may actually bring us joy also. Like let's say you distributed a book, that activity might come to your mind also, and that might be a source of pleasure, that might be a source of satisfaction. So if you attend the Aarti ceremony and you feel extremely satisfied by seeing how opulently the Lord is being worshipped, that actually might also be something that may help you get across the line also. So what happens? So if you practice like this, a devotee actually does not fear death. So most people are running away from death, but actually a devotee looks forward to death. In fact, there was one saint, it's explained that there was one saint who was quite sick, and his kidneys were starting to fail, and then his liver started to fail, he started becoming jaundiced, and his stomach started to distend because of fluid building up in his belly, and he became in a very miserable state, especially when we were looking at him from a materialistic point of view. He was looking extremely miserable. But then when the devotees, or when the other saints went and spoke to him, he said that I'm actually extremely ecstatic, I'm very happy. But everyone said, like your body looks in a lot of pain, you look like you're suffering quite a lot. He said that I'm extremely happy because the reason I'm extremely happy is that slowly God is taking away all of my bodily functions. And as God is taking away all of my bodily functions, I am extremely keen that He is going to see me very soon. So he says that is what is giving me excitement. And that is why I am actually not just happy to face death, but I'm eager to face death also. So this is not the same as people committing suicide. When people try to commit suicide, they are depressed and frustrated with life. Whereas these saints who practice devotional service, they are keen to not just leave their body, but they're actually keen to enter into the spiritual world because they know what's coming. They know that they're going to see their beloved Supreme Lord. They know that they're going to see their beloved spiritual master when they leave their body. And they're actually extremely enthusiastic about that. And in fact, that is one of the teachings of the Ramayana also. In Ramayana, it is said that a person should be anxious to leave their body. So this is, again, as I was saying, it's completely in contradiction. That is why Bhagavad Gita says that what is night for a saint is actually morning for the materialistic persons. And what is morning for the saint is actually night for the materialistic person. So I'll say that again. What is night for a saint is morning for a materialistic person. And what is morning for a saint is night for the materialistic person. It's a very poetic way of saying of presenting a point. What does this point say? It says that the devotee of the Lord and the non-devotee, or those who are materialistic in life, their view of this world is exactly the opposite. What the saint considers night is considered as morning by the other people. Like, for example, you can see intoxication, drugs, etc. These things are enjoyed by the materialistic people, but the saint that is night for them. They don't care about all of these things. Death is something that all materialistic people fear, but the devotee is extremely eager to approach death also. And that is why Krishna says that if one is able to practice this spiritual life nicely, if one is able to practice spiritual life, with this idea that, like I'm going to die, with the memory of death, or with bringing death into your foresight, then one is able to practice Krishna consciousness seriously also. Otherwise, we take bhakti for granted also. Like, okay, yeah, that's fine, I will chant Hare Krishna, I will eat prasadam, I will attend, and I will enjoy life also. What's wrong with that? That's fine. But actually, one who remembers death, who always has death in his foresight, that, I'm going to die one day, and I need to be prepared before then such a person becomes serious in spiritual life. And such a person will hear with attention, will chant with attention, will read with attention. In fact, he will be eager to read more and more about Krishna, because he knows that at the time of death, only Krishna will help, nothing else will help. So, having said that, I will finish there. There is 5 minutes. So, if anyone has any questions, any comments, or anything you'd like to share, or anything you disagree with, we can take that also. It's probably a bit too heavy, but that's all right. Yeah. Yes, bro.
What happens if someone, say, does devotional service for a large part of their life and then leaves it towards the end?
That's a good point. So, if a person performs devotional service throughout their life and then towards the end they leave it, this question was asked by Arjuna in chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita. Like, what happens to a yogi who is unsuccessful? One who does not complete his devotional service in his current life. So then Krishna explains that such a devotee, depending on how much devotional service he has performed in his current life, will get birth in a family of devotees in their next life, or they will be born in a very aristocratic family. Why aristocratic family? Because in an aristocratic family, all of your material needs are taken care of. So then a person can just devote their life to a spiritual understanding. But better than that is being born in the family of devotees. Because when one is born in a family of devotees, one cannot but help, remember, and think about Krishna 24/7. So if one is not able to complete their devotional service, they'll have to come back. But the problem is, we think that, okay, that's fine, it's okay, we'll just come back. But actually the process of death and then rebirth, again, is also very painful. In fact, like if you read the descriptions of what a baby undergoes in the womb of the mother, you will be mortified by how much suffering he has to go through. You can imagine, like it's such a small place where he is there. It's completely dark and he hears all these noises, like around him, like the heart beating and like all of these things, and he can't understand what's happening. If the mother eats spicy food, the baby suffers. If the mother eats too much salt, he suffers, etc. And then after a while, like he has no space to move. Like he's literally just stuck in one place. And then imagine the process of actually being delivered. Like that itself is extremely traumatic for the child. And that is why most children, they cry when they're born as well. And in fact, that the children that don't cry are considered abnormal. Like there's something wrong with them. So actually, just because we forget about it doesn't mean that we didn't actually experience that pain. That pain was experienced by us, but we forgot. That's why even this process of, or even if we think that, like, okay, that's fine, I'll just take birth again, that can also be, it's still filled with suffering. And then once you take birth, you have to go through the whole process again. Like you have to get old again, you have to undergo diseases again, and then you have to die again as well. But if we perform devotional service nicely in this life, then after this life we can go back to Krishna. But for that we have to perform devotional service seriously also. We have to take up Krishna consciousness a bit more seriously than what we're already doing. Yeah. So the main thing here from this verse is that we should not forget that we are going to die. We should remember that death is coming for us, and we don't know how death is going to come for us. We need to be prepared for how we're going to die, and the best way to be prepared for dying is to practice Krishna consciousness by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you for that nice question. Any other questions or comments or thoughts? Okay, so I think having said that, we can finish there. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Hare Krishna. Okay, so we'll stand up for Aarti now.